there was one thing my parents were good at when I was growing up, it was strong-arming me into doing things I didn't want to do. And one of the things that they forced me into was CCD, or Catholic Children's Dungeon, as we called it. Now, Catholic Children's Dungeon, or CCD, for those of you non-Catholics, and I'm guessing there might be a few of you here, is basically like Sunday school for Catholics, or like Catholic school light, like way light, like we didn't even crack a Bible once light. It was pretty much the biggest waste of 8 years of Wednesdays of my life. But my parents felt that it was important to give us a religious education, and also I think they really wanted to appease my very Catholic grandparents. And I'm pretty sure if they were honest with themselves, they wanted a way to get me out of the house for one night a week. But before you could really dig into the bowels of Catholic education, or CCD, Catholic Children's Dungeon, you have to prove that you are a willing Catholic. And the way that you prove that you're a willing Catholic at 7 or 8 years old is by performing the sacrament of Holy Communion. Now, communion is basically where you eat a shitty little wafer that tastes like nothing, and then somehow it magically reconstitutes itself inside your stomach as Jesus. This is called transubstantiation, and I learned that in CCD. It's the only thing I learned in CCD, and I'm sharing it with you, so you're welcome. Now, before you can eat Jesus' weird wafer body thing, you have to be cleansed of your sins. And the way that you are rinsed free of your horridness is by going to confession. Now, confession in Catholicism is basically where you walk into like a telephone booth thing, where there may or may not be a screen, so you may or may not be able to see the priest, and you go in and you tell him all the bad shit that you did. Now, keep in mind that at the time that I was supposed to do this, I was 8 years old, and I had not yet begun to sin. That would become later when I decided to be gay. It's a choice. Don't let anyone tell you differently. So, where was I? Confession. Right, but so when you're a kid, you know, it's not like you're committing like, you know, after-school program adultery or, you know, like playground bracketeering or something. But I had to tell the priest something, right? So on the day of my confession, my first confession, I'm sitting in the pew and I'm really nervous. Like, what am I going to tell this guy? And finally, it comes to me. So my name finally gets called, and I walk in the telephone booth thing, and there's no screen, so I'm like sitting face to face with the priest, and he is all business, like no smile, whatever. And so I just sit down, and I try to remember the script, because there's a script for this. And you go in, you say, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. This is my first holy confession." I was like really impressed because I remembered the words. And then he said, "And what sins have you committed, my child?" And he was all like beatific and glowing and stuff. And I said, I was like not very nice to my little brother. Yes. And I didn't listen when my parents asked me to like clean up my bedroom. Yes. Go on. And at this point, I'm getting the sense that he's like fishing for something a little juicier, you know? And so I let him have it. I looked him dead in the face, and I said, "I had sex with my neighbor." Now, at this point, any normal adult would be like, "What the fuck?" Because that is not a normal thing for an 8-year-old to say. But the priest was like totally unfussed, like, this is not the first time he heard this. And so he just looked at me, and he nodded, and he said, "What do you mean by sex?" And I told him about my neighbor, Robbie. Now, Robbie was a year younger than me and a total weirdo. Like, I remember one time he dug a hole in his backyard so he would never have to go inside to use the bathroom. And so Robbie used to come over and knock on my door and ask if I wanted to play. And by play, he meant did I want to go behind the bushes on the side of his house and watch while he pulled his shorts down and showed me his penis. And I did not reciprocate. Don't get any ideas. I didn't reciprocate. I did not touch anything. I just looked because penises are weird, right? And I didn't have one. And also, like, he was 7. Like, what's to look at anyway? You know what I mean? But I was pretty convinced that what we had engaged in was sex, in fact. Because at this point, the only sex ed I had was when a teacher told me that vaginas look like upside down pears and penises look like bananas, and you basically just mash them together and make a fruit salad, and that's where babies come from. So what I'm saying is I was a little slow. But the priest did nothing to disabuse me of my notion of what sex was. This would have been a perfect teachable moment to give me a little lesson on the birds and the bees and send me on my way. But instead, he just gave me penance. He said, say 3 Hail Marys and 4 Our Fathers and go in peace, my child. And he gave like the sign of the cross, and he asked me to send in the next kid. Like, no call to my parents. No call to social services. Like, not even a little hint that I might be just a little bit off. Instead, I got sent away with some prayers and a slightly less guilty conscience. And the thing is, I left that telephone booth thinking, like, I had, in fact, had sex with my neighbor, but it was okay because I told the priest, and, like, now I'm clean. It was years before I realized that wasn't sex. I was like 12 at the time. So for like 5 years, I thought I'd had sex. But after that, I never went in another confession booth. And I never talked to another adult about sex. And I certainly never copped to anything that I hadn't actually done. Thanks very much.